What's up, everybody? Back again at the Hot Zone Podcast. Your boy XSS Gaming here, your host. Today, we're going to be talking about politics, about how the United States politics works, and then how maybe some of the world politicians work. Today, we're going to be discussing a lot of harsh topics, a lot of hard topics for a lot of people to digest. So if you are somebody who's easily offended, I recommend you click off the video and just watch another one of my videos or whatever, because I know that this is going to be a hard video for some people to watch. If you're interested in these topics and you want to have a conversation about them, let me know down below your opinions, your feelings, how you think things should be ran, and I'd love to hear from you guys. But if you guys would like to hear this conversation, I would definitely recommend staying and sticking around. Now, this episode might be a little bit shorter as well, um, but I think it'll be worthwhile watching. So, let's get into it. So, as many people know from watching my content and watching me on social media or talking to me in real life, I am a conservative. I'm a white male conservative, so obviously that's going to tell you a little bit about how I view the world. Now, I'm also a history nerd. I love history. I do civil war reenacting, and I love looking at history and looking at the facts and the evidence to support my beliefs. I know some people like to have their beliefs that are separate from their facts. I try not to do that. I try to do as much of my beliefs based on facts as I can possibly do. But obviously, there's still some beliefs that I have that are tied to my own individual personality than they are tied to facts. And I think the biggest thing right off the bat is let's get a basic understanding on how the U.S. government works. Because a lot of people don't seem to understand this, right? We have um, a pretty simple but complex system for our government, right? We have three branches, and each branch has their own specific duty that we'll get into. So, first, we have the legislative branch. Don't mind my English. I'm terrible at English today. I don't know why. I was trying to write a paper and I cannot even write my paper, bro. So just don't mind my awful pronunciation today. The legislative branch makes laws. This branch is made up of Congress, which includes the Senate and the House of Representatives. So a lot of people like to believe that the United States politics revolves around the president. And while yes, it does, the president is just the poster child, is a poster boy of the United States government, right? Think of the president in today as the modern day version of the queen or king, right? Like if you go to England, a majority of the laws are being made by the House of Delegates or whatever they have over there, the cabinet, I think is what they often call it. A lot of those laws and things, those rules that are being made up, are actually made by those guys. And a lot of the queen or the king doesn't really have a whole lot of powers in terms of what they're doing day to day, right? They're more of just the show. Now, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, it would have been very different. Kings and queens, presidents and aristocrats and all that type of stuff would have had a lot of power, and some of them still do in today's modern age. A majority of them have like a parliament or a congress, or they have a House of Delegates or something that makes up a lot of the rules. Not really the kings and queens; they're more of just a show puppet type of thing. So let's get that kind of out the way. So the president doesn't necessarily run the government. He just is the poster child. He does have rules and laws and things he has to do and abide by, but it's not as crazy OP as you think it would be. We have the executive branch, which enforces the laws. This is where the president is. This president leads this branch and is nominated as the head of federal agencies. So the president's in charge of things like deciding who leads like the FBI or CIA or Congress or whatever. He has powers that he can use to his advantage. He's also one of the only people that can authorize nuclear warheads. The problem is a lot of people think that he's the only person that can authorize nuclear warheads, and when in fact he cannot do that without Congress's approval, from my knowledge. He can't just shoot a nuke at Russia at any time he wants. He would have to have authorization from Congress that would allow it. Now there is circumstances that would allow him to do this, or her to do this, depending on the president, um, at any given time. But those are such niche situations that it's unlikely. Judicial branch is the one that interprets the laws. Like this consists of the Supreme Court, who is the highest court in the country, and has justices interpret laws in accordance with the Constitution. Now, the reason I wanted to go over this is because a lot of people forget about the judicial and the legislative branch. A lot of people, I think, honestly think the Congress and the House of Representatives and Senate are all a part of the executive branch with the president, but they're not. They're separated. And the reason our founding fathers did this was to ensure a equal power split. See, the problem when you have one or two branches is someone always gets stronger than the other. This is just how things work. When you have three branches that need each other, they can't do something without the other's approval. What happens is you lock yourself in a trifecta of power, meaning the powers are more balanced between the three than there are two or one powers. Now, if the president was the only powerful branch in the government, we would be looking at a dictatorship or a hierarchy, right? Because whoever was president would have all the power. When they die, it would be the next in line, which would ever be voted in or would be born into it. When you add the legislative branch, you're now accessing more power to other people who can now even overthrow. Like Congress can overthrow the president on different topics very easily, right? They could just outvote him. So that's something to keep in mind. And then the judicial branch kind of keeps everybody in check, right? Anytime that Congress or the president or the American people break a law that affects the U.S. Constitution, they have to deal with the Supreme Court. And this is why it's very, very, very important that you understand who your Supreme Court and House of Representatives and Senate people are, right? We all know who the president is. Like currently, as of 2024, the president of the United States is now Donald J. Trump. The former president, Joe Biden, and his running mate, which was Kamala Harris, and then Trump's Vance. If they say, for example, pump out a law that is unconstitutional, the Senate can just veto it, right? Or the House of Representatives can just veto it, or Congress in general. And then if they don't and it's still unconstitutional, the Supreme Court can deal with that. And which is why I say it's so important to know them, because the president really is just a name and a face that represents the country, but when you get down to the meat and potatoes of it, your House, your Senate, your Congress, your Supreme Court, those are the groups of people who truly determine what happens in this country. So obviously I'm not well educated in exactly the best forms of government. I do believe capitalism is the best. I do think communism is by far the worst. I will say that. But I don't know whether or not a king and queen are technically better. There is definitely circumstances that they could be. I think the kings and queens have a better, not necessarily track record, but a better appearance in terms of power and respect and integrity, and stuff like that. Like we all love a fairy tale. We all love the kings and queens of movies and TV shows. But do we really think that kings and queens are better than a president? Or I think some people would say they're more of the same than they are different in a lot of ways, especially in the modern era. Maybe in the past, not necessarily. But yeah, that is my opinion on that. So let's move into some of the more harsh topics. Now, one of the harsh topics that I wanted to get into, and this is going to be one that's going to be hard for people to swallow, that is abortion. And the reason I wanted to go into abortion is because it is a thing that is very close to my beliefs in modern era. The older I get, this belief has become more stern. I truly do believe that abortion should not be legal in any circumstances. And the reason for this is very simple. No person should be murdered without reason, and even in our cases, really no reason, because depending on how you look at it, technically things like war aren't murder. And in general, if you're, in civilian life that's not military based, killing another person is usually not okay. Obviously, if it's in self-defense, that's one thing, but even in some places, it's not even legal to do that. And it's weird because majority of people would consider a fetus, a human, or a baby pretty early on in the pregnancies of, at least in the United States, anyway. I don't know how it is overseas. But in the United States, we consider it pretty early. I think it's like 5 or 11 weeks, so it's pretty early in. And so I feel like if we're going to say that that's a human, well, that's a baby, which is basically the same thing, um, then it does in fact have the right to choose whether it wants to live or die. And because it can't choose, it is our responsibility to allow it to live until it can decide if it wants to live or die, which is most likely live, right? 99% of the time it's going to say live. Um, and so obviously my beliefs are also rooted in Christian beliefs, as I am a Christian. But my beliefs have been here since before I was a Christian because I haven't always followed the Christian path. I haven't always read the Bible. I haven't always prayed to God. I always haven't um, followed the word of Jesus Christ. But before I used to do that, I used to just be a normal guy who kind of believed but didn't really care, if that's a good word. Um, Even then, I still believe that killing innocent children in the womb is not okay. And the reason for this is because when we begin as a community and as a society accepting the fact that we can murder things inside of us because we don't want them, and they are living, technically breathing beings, when does it stop? Right? Because at one point we're going to say okay to that, and then now it'll be okay to kill old people when they're sick, and it'll skyrocket down into a spiral down into a disaster of a thing. And you might say, well, that's not how it's going to go. And I think people just need to look at history for this. Racism existed because people just became normalized by it, right? For thousands of years, racism dominated the globe. It was only in recent years, in the last 150 or so years, and hundreds of thousands of people died to fight for the right to vote or the right to drink at the same water taps as their fellow man, that we understood the wrongs that we had committed. And I think that's very, very important, right? You look at back at the ancient Egyptians, they took hundreds of thousands of fucking slaves to build their pyramids. You look at the Americas during the early 1800s and 1700s. We had a fought a war for independence, saying that all men are created equal. We turned around and enslaved the African American population and murdered thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of Native Americans. And so history is full of repeats, full of lessons that we do not learn because we've just become okay with that ideology. It took us an entire civil war and over 600,000 dead before we even realized that African Americans were the same as a white man. And then it took us an additional almost 100 years before they got the rights to vote and do many of other things that we all do for day-to-day life. So think about that. If we can go thousands of years believing that slavery and racism and all these things are okay, then what does it say that us, if we begin to say that abortion's okay, what does it say that we will not just spiral out of control? For example, look at this, the LGBT community as a whole. The beginning of the entire movement was, gay rights, like lesbians and male gays. Because I don't know if people consider lesbians the same category as gays, but whatever. Because they're never labeled the same. They're always considered different. But what I continue. But now they're saying that men and women can switch genders and can be a ton of different genders, and they can go into kids' bathrooms and change or do whatever. And that all bathrooms should now be unisex, and how there should be drag races and drag parades and all this type of stuff everywhere, and kids should be indoctrinated into this ideology. It spiraled. It spiraled out of control in front of our very eyes. It has spiraled out of control. Now, doubt it. I'm not saying either way if with transgender should be a thing or not. I don't care if you want to be trans, be trans. But the thing is, and the point I'm trying to make is just 50 years ago, not even that, 25 years ago, it would have been illegal to be gay. Now, it's legal, and if not anything, it's more prideful to be gay now than ever before. And that's all because time and humans spiral out of control. We all do it. Just think of the last time you had to make a hard choice in life, right? You spiral out of control. For example, take me. I'm working on a script for a video for Saturday. And every time I go to write it, I start spiraling out of control because it's going to require me to go out in public and record a video in front of people, in front of my family, and things that I am not super comfortable with. And so my anxiety sweeps me. And so I begin to spiral, thinking if it's worth it, if I should do it, or if it's going to be an embarrassing moment. And so if I'm spiraling for that, we as a society spiral way out of control for way larger things at foot. For me, I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is because people will spiral out of control for so many different things, right? Like, it's so easy for us to spiral. And I think if we are so easily spiraled out of control in our day-to-day lives, when it comes to anxiety or depression or etc., like when your mom and dad or your wife and you or your girlfriend or you or whatever are struggling to pay bills and they spiraling out of control, and they're like not sure how they're going to pay things, and it just gets really rough and they start freaking out, etc. And that's the same thing for how I feel about abortion, right? I feel like it's something where at first it might not be bad, but it's beginning to spiral out of control. But that's just my view. And I think that this is a topic that is more complex. I mean, in my personal belief, it shouldn't be complex, but I understand why it's complex for a lot of people. And I think that it's worth having a discussion, and I think that Trump has a fantastic way to deal with this issue come his term. For those that don't know, I know the media likes to paint things in a certain way, but Trump's plan for this situation, for this problem for the country, is to allow the states to decide. So if you are in a state that allows it, you are in a state that allows it, and if you're in a state that decides not to allow it, you're in a state that does not allow it. And what this does is allow people, if they want to have it done, go to a different state, move to a different state, go visit a different state, have it done there. Um, and I think that's the way it should be. Let the states decide whether or not they should have abortion, legal or not. That's a good idea. Now, let's talk about some other things. So I do want to mention that there is a war, in fact, happening right now in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, and there's also a war between terrorist group Hamas and Israel. Now, I'm sure you know about these two topics very well by this point. They've been covered to death, quite literally. Um, but for me, these wars have, I think, a larger impact in the global stance than people realize. A lot of people think that these wars are not our problem. And while, yes, I agree, but these wars are indeed these things are indeed affecting us in our very day to day lives. Do we that get infected? You see, America is the strongest military and the strongest country on the planet. It doesn't matter whether or not you like America or not. We are in fact the strongest. There is no military greater than us. There's no economy that is greater than us in terms of just what we're able to do. Um, we're a billions and billions and billions of dollar GDP. Like, we have so much money that we can, our military alone out earns most countries, which is mental, right? We also control most of the trade routes, and we have some of the best logistics of any country. You need to look no further than history to see that we have the best logistics. I mean, the Berlin airlift. The Fat Electrician has a great video on that. You should check it out. Um, and so everyone looks to us. It's like, okay, it's like the best way to explain it is like your big brother or big sister. You oftentimes look to them, right, in times of question or in times of suffering or pain or confusion or frustration, right? You're trying to figure out if you should ask someone out on a date and you're kind of nervous. Who's the first person you're probably going to ask? Either your friend, but more than not, and more than likely, you're going to ask your sister or your brother that's older than you. And that's the same thing for America. Everyone wants to ask it for help and for advice and guidance. Now, America has abused this power many times, and that is a topic for a different day. But um, I would say about 87% of the time, America does the right thing and tries to say, well, you can handle it on your own, but we'll help you the best we can. And I think that is a great way of going about it. The problem is that sometimes when you give a response like that, we often get stuck um, in the deal that may not be the beneficial thing for us. Hence, Israel and Ukraine, Russia and Hamas. These two wars going on right now, I do believe are the pillars of our entire civilization in the balance. Which is a big statement, I know. But we have to look no further than history to see how very quickly things can spiral out of control. World War One spiraled out of control after an assassination on Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Okay, and one country targeted one country for war, and without a moment's notice, the world was darkened into a hellish war that would last far too long and take over, what is it, 30 million lives, 60 million lives. Hitler would come to power during a country's weakest moment, and he would take control and allow an entire group of people to think they were better than everybody else and partake in the Holocaust. America was a small country at the time, a colony, and believed that its powers were not justifiably given and were taken away. And we began a revolution, and we took down the greatest empire in all of human history, in all honesty. France had a revolution that started because they helped America. There's a lot of things in history that tell us what we should and should not do, who we should help and who we should not. And I think that's a big thing that a lot of people forget, is how crucial history is. People forget it. Okay? There's a quote that I love, and it says, if you do not know history, you're doomed to repeat it. And I think that is a perfect quote, no matter how many times I've heard it, no matter how many times people laugh at the joke, at the quote. It is one of the most realistic quotes and most honest quotes that I've ever heard. Because it's just so very true to the meat and bones that make us human. The Ukrainian and Russian war is so vitally important to the future of humanity. And the reason for that is because it is a battle against freedom and tyranny. That's what it is. Ukraine is a country that does no longer want to be part of its homeland, all right? If you even want to consider a homeland. Ukraine has wanted to be their own individual country for so long, and they've been battling that for decades. The recent war was a strike against Ukraine by Russia. They incited the violence, they started the war. Thousands of U.S. citizens have volunteered to fight. Thousands of Canadians, French, German, Syrian, Afghanistan civilians, Arabs, Egyptians, Britain. There's so many people have volunteered to fight alongside the Ukrainians during this war. And why I think it's the most vital situation right now for the future of humanity is because this will lay out the testament for what can and cannot be done without the world's response. You see, we haven't had a world war in a long time. Upwards of 70 something years. And then since that time, we've lived in a gradual era of peace. I know we have had wars since then, like Afghanistan, Iraq, in Syria, etc. But in Korea, Vietnam. But in terms of world conflicts, we have been in an era of great peace for a very long time. We are now in an era of peace that has lasted longer than the era of peace between World War I and II. And so I think about this often, about the consequences of us allowing a country to take over another country without cause or without reason. And that's what's happening in Russia, right? There is a large community being attacked unlawfully and are fighting for their survival. Russia has already intimidated other countries surrounding Ukraine, threatening war against them if they do not back off. There is a dog that needs to be restrained from its aggressiveness. And if it's not, I fear the worst. But all hope is not lost. You know, we, as humans, we're often programmed to be last thought focused, worst thought focused. And I don't think that. I try not to think that. I should say. I try not to. I try to look at the positives that come out of the situation. Now, with Israel and Hamas, it's a little more complicated because it's a far older conflict. The context that I will give here, and I will keep this brief because I know this is going to start some beef, and I want to try to keep this as friendly as possible. The Palestinian, Israeli, and Hamas conflict has been going on for a very long time, I think over 1,000 years. But the state of Palestine has not been around that long. See, a lot of people believe that Palestine has been a country for thousands of years. It hasn't. Most most of Israel, the Jews, the Arabs, all these different groups have been movers, right? They've been movers throughout history. And what I mean by that is, especially for the Jews after World War II, there really wasn't a home for them, right? So NATO became a thing after World War II and gave a chunk of land to the Arabs of Palestine, and it also gave a chunk of land to the Israelites. And the reason for this was to balance out the power because they had to give both sides a little bit of something because they both wanted something from the war, especially the Jews who had suffered so much throughout the war. And so their way of doing this was giving them Palestine and Israel. Now, there's a lot of wars and a lot of complications, a lot of bad things that both sides partook in throughout the period after World War II. You can look this up. There has been many different insurrections and battles and wars that have been fought between the two since in less than the last 100 years, even a little shorter than that, last 60, 70 years. Um, Hamas was a formation of terrorist ideals that is a separate branch from Palestine. It is important to know that these are separate from Palestine, right? The Palestinians are not the same as Hamas, and we'll get into that in a minute. Okay, because they're different. Now, I have a very brief understanding of it. I only did very little research, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. Just did a very little amount of research. I did enough to understand sort of the conflict over there so that I could better judge the conflict, right? Which I recommend everyone does. You don't need to be an expert in the subject, but you should do a little bit of research so you know what you're talking about. Now, from my understanding, Israel and Palestine had given, I think, the Gaza to Hamas, if I'm correct, or Hamas was in Gaza, but they were taken out and someone else was put in Gaza. It's very complex. Anywho, this Gaza Strip kept getting tossed back and forth for a long time. And then recently, there's been a lot of conflict in Israel and Palestine due to the fact that Hamas murdered hundreds of innocent baby women and children and men over in Israel. Israel retaliated against Hamas to get revenge, is the best way to put it, which is their right, as any country, any human being should have. If you kill somebody, you should have the chance to retaliate, all right? Especially on the grand scale of a terrorist attack. Now, I won't get into the situation in Israel currently because it is very complex, but I will say that the amount of civilians dying by Israel in Palestine first could be very easily reverted or converted by giving up Hamas. A lot of Palestine is actually harboring Hamas, which is inadvertently causing them more harm than it is good. If they would just give up Hamas, they'd probably be a lot safer. But I understand it's complex. Now, I will say the amount of civilians dying is extremely exaggerated in the terms of actual history of what happens in a war zone. America, for example, killed lots of civilians during the Afghanistan war on terror. History has proven this time and time again that when you have a war, civilians will die. It is sad, it is unfortunate, and it is horrible, but this is the truth of the situation. Civilians do die. World War II, a good chunk of the deaths in World War II were civilian, right? Look at the numbers. There was a lot of civilians dead. I mean, the Holocaust was nothing but civilians, and the Holocaust killed millions. This is the side effect of war, right? Now, I'm not by no means playing down the deaths of any civilians in any war. I'm just pointing out the fact that this is something that happens, no matter whether it's justified or not. These are the numbers, and these are the things that happen in war. And I think that there is no way of getting around it. We can do our best to get better at it so that we do not cause harm to civilian people that do not need to have harm caused to them. But I don't think that we are there yet. Now, Israel is doing the best they can, I believe, truly. The techniques that they're using are a lot more aggressive now than they were, or they're more aggressive than they are now. They're a little less aggressive now. I think they're doing more of specialty unit type things where they go in, take a area out, and then leave. Um, as technology gets better and better and better, we're getting better as a society at dealing with problems without causing harm to innocents. For example, America has a lot of a lot of smart drones and UAVs that are able to strike a car in the middle of a city street without killing anybody else. We have SEAL teams that are designed to simply go in, take out targets, and get the fuck out without any other people getting injured. And so we are getting better as a society. Now, data at war shouldn't be a thing in general, but war is always going to happen, and so the best thing we can do as a society is not necessarily get rid of war, is just get better at doing it without causing harm to those that don't need harm caused to them. That's all I will say on that topic. If you guys want to hear me and my thoughts on Israel and Ukraine and all that stuff in another episode, I would love to do some research, further research, and get even maybe maybe a guest on from those countries and really have an honest conversation, because I would really think that's a really interesting, and I think again it's super important because there's other terrorist groups that are watching how the world deals with Hamas. Just remember that, right? We're only a few years since it's only been a few years since 9/11 and the Boston bombing. Okay, people think because it was 2001, that's a long time ago. It really wasn't. It was the beginning of the 2000s. I mean, that's like 21 years ago. It's not that long of a time. And most of us have been born since then, right? And some of us in this that are watching this was there and saw 9/11 happen and saw the Boston bombing happen. So these things are very close in time to us. And so these other terrorist groups like Al Qaeda and ISIS and all these other groups are watching now more than ever before, seeing how we handle Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. And they're seeing how we respond, how we deal with it, how we cope with it. And right now, I think how we respond and how we decide to respond and think about it depends on our safety going forward. Because these groups, these heinous terrorist groups, they target the weak. They target the ones that they know they can manipulate into believing that they were victims. The terrorists, I say, victims. And so remember that, right? Remember that the next time you see a Hamas propaganda footage online. Remember that there's groups out there that want you to believe the propaganda that the Hamas is spreading. That's something they want you to believe in. And so you have to really take a step back and think about what you believe in. Don't change it, right? That's not the point. The point is to just know, question everything. Don't be afraid to question everything. I question things all the time. I question what I should eat for lunch half the time, right? I'll be making food and be like, should I have made something else? Because questioning things makes you a better human being, and it makes you a more thought out human being. Now, that was a lot. So let's kind of revert it back to politics. Now, I I know there's a lot of people who don't trust governments, and rightfully so. Governments are awful in most circumstances, most circumstances. But I'm of the belief that instead of not trusting the government, we should trust it even more. Okay, counter ideology there. And the reason for this is the government, because we don't trust the government, they act on their own tuition. They have no regulations, right? They don't have the expectations of honesty towards us. And because of this expectation of not needing to be honest, because they know that we know they're trash and they're liars, right? They then partake in actions that they deem as right, even if they know we think they're wrong. But if we do the vice versa and we give them more trust and we build a relationship with the government, we will make our government stronger. See, the founding fathers had that same belief. The founding fathers made the three branches a part of the government, not for the people, but by the people, because they wanted us to have better control. They didn't want us to become the queen and king of England. Because at the time, remember, the queen and king were pretty freaking strong, man. They were pretty strong, right? They were like the OG king and queens that we think of in modern eras. Like when you think back in history, they were the type of queens that we know. They were, strict. They had all the power, etc., etc., etc. So they wanted us to be different. They wanted us to have our own beliefs and be able to structure our own government in a way that kept us all together and in unity. Well, it took us a long time to figure that unity out, and then we did, and then we didn't when we had a civil war, and after that we came back together, and I like to say we came back stronger than ever, but um, we had a lot of rough time in between then and then, with the whole civil rights movement and stuff. We had two world wars. So think of it like this: when you go buy something from the store, right? You are and then indeed trusting the government. Even just turning your light on, eating your food that you bought from the grocery store, everything you do in a daily life is trusting the government. You may not realize it, especially if you don't. If you're not a farmer, you're trusting the government. Let's put it that way, because farmers usually eat their own produce that they grow, etc. Especially for Amish, you're doing all your stuff on your own. You're not attached to the grid or anything, so you're not trusting the government. But if a normal person, you're watching this video right now, are trusting the government. You're trusting the government to keep your power on, trusting the government to keep the grid working, trusting your government to put healthy things in your food or to make sure your food's not poisoned because they have regulations on that. You're trusting that your groceries will be delivered in a timely manner. You're trusting the government for your money that you get every paycheck. You're trusting your government to not allow you to be murdered in your home and that person get away with it. You're trusting in the government for so many things you don't even realize. And because of this, people oftentimes say, "Well, I don't trust the government. I don't trust the government." It's like you do. You just don't realize it. The difference is people just don't care about the government. It's not that they don't trust it. They're confused on the difference between care and trust. Because we all trust the government in many different ways. We may not trust what they say. We may not trust the regulations they put into effect, but we sure as hell take advantage of those things. Okay, you take advantage of the grid, which is the greatest human invention in the modern age, right? The grid, which is the power grid, is such an amazing feat that we have accomplished in modern age. But you trust the government to run it and keep it running, which is crazy, right? Think of it like that. Like, that's crazy. You allow them, you trust them to keep your power on. If the government wanted to, they could just shut us all off. And we're back in the Stone Age. But if you cared about the government, you would vote. You would voice your opinion to your representatives, right? Because this is the thing that people forget. You can talk to your representatives anytime. There's numbers you can call, get in contact. You can even go to your local courthouse or whatever, your state courthouse, and you can talk to your representative. A lot of times they're there, and you can talk to them. And so you can voice your opinions. You can voice your concerns. You can protest. You can talk online to your fellow humans, your fellow patriots. Discuss your feelings, because we're in a free country after all, right? A lot of countries don't have the privilege you have to go out and protest or go out and disagree with the government. We are a place that allows that type of discourse, and I think that is what's amazing about this country, right? We're very unique in that way. So if you care, then you can help change the system and make it better and to your advantage, to your liking. And I think that's important, because otherwise we are doomed to repeat history. And throughout history, you've seen multiple times what happens when the trust for the government goes down the drain. Now, some of you might say, well, the government has done nothing but lie to us for the last decade or so. And while yes, that's true. But we all lie. We all fake stories and fake things and whatever. What makes the difference is whether or not we try to be better or not, right? Whether we try to be smarter than not, and try to do better. Because I'd like to think that the government has honestly the best intentions for the country because they need the country to flourish in order for them to flourish, right? The government would fail if the country fails, right? They're one. Okay, the country and the government are one. They are together. They're like conjoined twins, right? They can't go nowhere. They're stuck together for forever, right? They can't go nowhere. And so they need to make sure that the country's flourishing for them to flourish, and for them to flourish, the country needs to be flourishing, vice versa. So instead of raging at the government, instead of complaining at the government, listen, digest, learn, vote, speak out. Those are all simple things you can do. And I think within time, you will find that the country is not as far from its end as you may feel. There's still hope out there. I think the 2024 election is just that. I know a lot of people are upset that Kamala Harris lost, but I remind you of this. In her 4 years of terms that she's done, okay, she's done 4 years as Vice President of the United States of America. She has not done a whole lot. She has bought many people's votes, including celebrities. She has paid for their votes and their propaganda. And on the other side of the fence, you have a candidate named Donald J. Trump, who is now the president-elect, going to be president within the next couple of weeks and months, going into January. And Trump has done 4 years, had a great economy, had no wars under his belt the entire time he was in presidency, had great business, had great jobs, bust into the United States. We had jobs coming back from overseas, and our economy is doing great. And there was no propaganda a lot at that time. And I think that is the thing that people should be concerned about. You don't have to like the man. You don't have to like her, right? What matters is what they have accomplished in their times as president and vice president, right? Because that's what matters. And I think America voting this election and voting for the person who has more experience and has done a better job, no matter the person, is enough to give people faith that we are okay as a country. We're going to do all right. So when you go to sleep tonight after watching this video, remember that. Not everyone just blatantly follows politicians. Most of us understand there has to be a reason to follow. And you don't have to follow like a sheep. Okay? You don't have to. You can follow like a wolf. Okay? Follow like a fox. Right? Or an eagle. Follow, but also be in control of what you believe. Don't let them change how you believe. But take control of how you believe. But don't be afraid to follow people who are doing good. I know it's hard these days to trust politicians, and rightly so, but there is still a lot of good ones out there. You just have to find them. And I think that's the biggest thing, the hugest thing. Um, because we don't want to lose the good politicians. There's good ones out there, you don't want to lose them. When we lose the good politicians, we will be engulfed in bad ones. And when the good stops fighting the evil, we're doomed. So don't do that. But that's just my view, right? If you think the government should not be trusted no matter what, I would love to hear it. But for me, that is why I am so interested in politics and why I keep up to date with everything that's happening as much as I possibly can, because knowledge is power, guys. Knowledge is power. Knowing right and wrong, what's happening in your backyard, that is power. Money is power, sure. Love is power, sure. Guns, bombs, explosives, nukes are power, sure. But knowledge is the greatest power God has ever given you. You just got to know how to tap into it. Once you figure out how to tap into that knowledge, and you learn, and you understand, you will make some better choices as a person, and you will see the difference you make every single day. And if you feel strongly enough, run for Congress, run for Senate, run for the president. Okay? Go for it. And I'm sure someone out there will agree with you. And all you have to do is change one person's life, and that will change the outcome of the entire century. It's like the butterfly effect. One simple thing can change the course of human history. The question is whether or not will you be a part of that change, or will you sit on the sidelines and allow that change to consume you? That, my friends, is the question. As always, thank you guys for watching the Hot Zone podcast. I'm your host, Excelsus Gaming. Next Sunday, we will have another episode. Next Saturday, we have a weird edit. My headset died mid-conversation. fucking headsets, bro. But next Saturday, we have a very special Remembrance Day video planned. Hopefully, it comes to fruition. If you guys have any ancestors that were in any wars, I will need their name, the title they held / the war they fought in, and if they have anything special about them that I should know about, either Medal of Honors, Purple Hearts, whatever. Preferably one per person. And if you do, join my Discord down below. There'll be a link to my link tree, which will have a link to my Discord. Join the Discord and private DM me that information so I can mention them in the video. I would like to get a couple of people's ancestors because I feel like it'd be super great to interact with everybody that way. This is a very important video for me. It's something that I'm going to be planning for over the next couple of days, getting ready for. And I'm so excited for you guys to see what I have to say, because it's going to be interesting, to say the least. And very cool. And heartwarming. I hope. But thank you guys so much for watching this. If you guys felt like you were being attacked in your beliefs in any way, please don't. This is not a video with me trying to tell you how you should think. This is mainly just me saying how I feel and how I believe. So if you have a difference of opinion, I would love to see it down below. Maybe we'll have some cool conversations. Please keep it respectful. Don't be mean to people who have different beliefs. Because if we do that, we are no better than terrorists or tyrannistic aristocrats. Okay? So be nice down below. Be welcoming to ideas. If you don't agree, just say I respectfully disagree and leave it at that, right? If you can't have a respectful conversation. And yeah, I love you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Good night.